A very good morning to you, Leanne, and good morning to everybody at home. Welcome to the latest in the series of New Age Business Briefings brought to you by the SABC, and today kindly sponsored by 49M. And as Leanne was saying, we're talking to the Minister of Public Enterprises today, but he will be joined by the CEOs of Transnet and Eskom, and I'll be introducing them to you in a short while because we're having a huge conversation today about infrastructure spend and also, I guess, all the other things that come up when we talk about state-owned enterprises. But this time a year ago, Minister of Finance Pravin Gordhan talked about 827 billion rand being set aside for infrastructure spend over the next 3 years and something in the order of 4 trillion over 15 years. And many people hailed this as a much needed injection into perhaps stimulating the economy and growing it, and also dealing, of course, with unemployment. But just how will this happen? How far down the line are we? Because it's the end of year one of those three. To tell us a little bit more about that and also have a conversation about that and what it means for you and I at home, it's my great pleasure now to welcome the Minister of Public Enterprises, Mr. Malusi Gigaba. And as he's coming up, don't forget the Twitter handle, #TNABizBrief, also at Morning Live SABC. We'd love to hear from you and put questions directly to Minister. Minister, good to meet you again. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, both at home and here at this venue, Galaka Estate. It's good to be back here. About a month or so ago, I met Peter somewhere in shorts. I must say he does look not fit. And I guess, given the rain in Johannesburg, it's safe to say, extinguished gentlemen and ladies. Today, I do not intend to give a detailed account of how infrastructure rollout has been going, as I believe the President may do so during the State of the Nation address soon, giving full account of how this government has, during the past 20 years, and particularly during the past 5 years, made South Africa a better place to live in than it was in 1994, when we, the people of South Africa, defeated apartheid and started embarking on a journey to put behind us the painful history of colonialism and racial supremacy. Indeed, much as daunting challenges still persist, we have a good story to tell, and we cannot turn back. We must move South Africa forward all the time. Because when all is said and done, all our efforts have been, are still, and must continue to be, guided by the abiding notion to improve the quality of lives of all South Africans, to create a better life for all by creating sustainable, decent and quality jobs, fighting poverty and inequality. Over the next 5 years, radical economic transformation is the most important question that must be answered. Our people want social justice now. Of course, to create social inclusion and hence social justice requires that we act today with speed and urgency to implement radical economic programs, including the infrastructure development and industrialization programs. The South African economy is projected to grow at 2.8% in 2014 and more than 3% in 2015-2016. This signals a recovery in the economy, both domestically and globally. The key driver of this growth is capital gross formation from both public corporations as well as private enterprises, including the general government. The global economy is showing strong signs of recovery, which augurs well for the South African economy, although growth will not happen by itself, but will require a concerted effort by government, capital, labor, and community as a whole. Infrastructure programs remain a stimulant in our economy to date, as well as the driver and enabler of economic development and growth. The very process of building infrastructure and providing related services is a key source of investment demand and economic activity. To date, our state-owned companies have acted as catalysts for additional investment in the economy, boosting our economic gross capital formation to 4.4% of the GDP. However, the way that state-owned companies provide capacity, charge for their services, and procure their requirements can either support or retard the process of industrialization and economic transformation. Hence, the department has undertaken new initiatives of improving sectoral coordination through the establishment of joint forums between customers and state-owned companies to deal with market failure and inefficiencies. I will dwell on this issue much later. 19% of GDP was invested in fixed capital in 2013. Two-thirds of South Africa's investment in fixed capital over the last year was made by the private sector, whilst public corporations accounted for just over half of total government investment. In this regard, it is important to understand the magnitude of Eskom and Transnet's investment programs. They account for half of government's investment in fixed assets. Eskom will be investing over 500 billion rand in the next 5 years, whilst Transnet will be investing over 300 billion rand over 7 years. To give you a sense of how rapidly the program is growing, 3 years ago, our portfolio of state-owned companies in my department alone invested 53 billion rand. But in the current financial year, we are investing over 113 billion rand, an increase of over 100%. A program of this scale is unprecedented in South Africa's history, and it must change the pattern of ownership in the economy as well as our industrial outlook. It is important to get a tangible understanding of what this money will buy. Based on our existing plans, by 2020, an additional 11,719 megawatt of electricity will have been added into the electricity system, and 6,596 kilometers of transmission network installed to support security of supply. Existing logistics corridors will be expanded upon and new corridors will have been established, and 1,317 new locomotives and 25,000 new wagons will have been procured, and procured in a manner that puts in place a well-class, export-oriented rail manufacturing sector. 6,405 kilometers of rail will have been replaced for the general freight, coal and ore lines, increasing the rail network capacity by 149.7 million tons. And 13,125 kilometers of fiber optic cable would have been refurbished and strengthened to ensure carrier-grade status, and our broadband network would have been expanded to include metros and underserviced areas. Access to affordable broadband is critical for the integration of informal and mainstream economy improvements in access to quality education and healthcare. In concrete terms, this will have a dramatic impact on the mining sector and will dramatically improve our capacity to industrialize our economy, as well as our ability to export manufactured goods with stronger backwards and forward linkages in the economy. One of the critical things about this infrastructure investment is that it is not only based on the philosophy of maintaining and rehabilitating existing infrastructure, it is based on the philosophy, above all else, of creating new infrastructure capacity and thus creating enablers in our economy. We will be able to increase our exports of coal and iron ore by over 50%. Our ability to move general freight on rail will have more than doubled in capacity, and Transnet's container handling capacity will increase by 75%. Of course, the dramatic increase in our rail infrastructure and rolling stock will have a positive effect on our roads and will reduce the burden currently carried by many roads as a result of heavy cargo transported by road instead of rail, and will improve efficiencies, safety, and the quality of the roads, resulting in less accidents caused by poor and degraded roads. The shift from road to rail for both passengers and freight is associated with many positive externalities and is good for the economy. Our infrastructure state-owned companies are already key providers of employment, and with the additional infrastructure capacity that will be built, will become even more important sources of employment. If I might just make a few examples, Transnet's operational and capital expenditure activities were associated directly and indirectly with the employment of 205,000 people. By 2017, Transnet's activities will support the direct and indirect employment of 330,000 people. In 2013, Eskom accounted for the direct and indirect employment of 290,000 people, and by 2015, they will support the direct and indirect employment of 430,000 people. The President has already given the directive that 60% of all new jobs in the infrastructure program must be set aside for young people. State-owned companies are further playing a leading role in skills development and will be investing over 2.8 billion rand in the current financial year. Over the last year, more than 16,000 learners were trained in various scarce and critical learning programs within the state-owned companies in the portfolio of our department. Transnet has secured an amount of 175 million rand from the Department of Higher Education and Training to train an additional 1,000 learners on maritime engineering who are being recruited across the country. This will increase artisan learnership at Transnet training facilities to over 3,000 learners. Emerging industrial sectors make up small components of state-owned companies' revenue, yet they are strategic to support the government's industrialization objectives and economic transformation. In order to ensure that these sectors receive special attention, despite their relatively small size in the economy, the Department of Public Enterprises has taken a number of initiatives. We established an automotive competitiveness forum involving Transnet and Eskom, as well as the key original equipment manufacturers in South Africa and NAMSA, which has embarked on a number of collaborative initiatives, notably among those, the automotive wagon that was recently launched by the President in Port Elizabeth. There are certain non-negotiables when we procure equipment and services for our infrastructure programs. Again, over the coming years, we will be guided by the directive from the President that 75% of components and inputs for infrastructure must be procured from the local suppliers. For South Africa, such a procurement of capital goods in particular must result in tangible industrial development with significant impact on our objective of creating a new class of black industrialists. The past year has witnessed significant progress within Eskom and Transnet in embedding the competitive supplier development program, which has the objective of leveraging the capital and operational procurements of state-owned companies to promote investment in plant skills and technology, as well as to promote the development of new capabilities in existing, emerging, and new suppliers of capital equipment and social services and related services. Procurement policies, processes, and related systems have been revised to ensure that supplier development concerns are integrated into all strategic procurements. For CSDP objectives to be achieved, we are adopting an economic governance architecture which compels state-owned companies to allocate specific strategic capital goods procurement program with a focus on supplier development, localization with economic transformation outcomes. Economic transformation objectives must be deliberate, and the outcomes must not be an accident. We are determined to leverage the investment-related procurements of state-owned companies, as well as their operational expenditure, to achieve our transformation objectives. Eskom and Transnet have both identified specific areas of recurring and consistent operational expenditure, which they will leverage to create opportunities for small business. Transnet has established a one-stop shop to provide a range of value-added services to emerging enterprises and has entered into a range of partnerships to provide everything from incubation services to funding for aspiring entrepreneurs, as well as tax advice, so that new entrepreneurs can comply with the South African Revenue Service. Eskom has also set itself the target of spending over 24 billion rand a year on black youth-owned businesses by 2017. Thus far, they have reserved over 10.5 billion rand of spend for youth-owned businesses in a range of industries, including the National Electrification Project, vegetation management, coal mining, metering, and wooden pole production. These businesses will create over 4,700 skilled jobs. As part of its small business development, Eskom is leveraging Rotec, an Eskom subsidiary focused on construction of power lines and maintenance of power equipment, to act as an incubator for small businesses. This involves Rotec sourcing high-cost inputs such as steel from the emerging entrepreneurs, as well as deploying Eskom engineers to provide direct technical assistance to small businesses to ensure that they meet quality requirements. In addition, Eskom will be using different contracting methodologies to ensure that small business gets partnered with and receive practical support from established businesses. Over 5 years, Eskom is projected to spend over 200 billion rand for the supply of coal. In light of this, I had an engagement with established miners, the Chamber of Mines, SAMTA, and emerging miners in the coal and limestone value chain, after which I launched an emerging black miners strategy, the aim of which is to increase black participation and ownership in the coal mining sector. A key element of the strategy is to establish a mine development fund to provide finance for the development of mines, mainly at the early exploration stage. Eskom has finalized the design of this fund, and we're in the process of implementing it. Alexco is being repositioned to play a critical role to support the growth and development of the emerging mining sector, as well as to support Eskom's requirement for a secure, long-term supply of coal. Alexco will further play a facilitating role in the consolidation of emerging miners to achieve adequate economies of scale through exploring opportunities for beneficiation and through providing technical support to emerging miners to enable applications of the fund. We intend to ensure that by 2018, over 50% of Eskom's coal supply comes from black coal miners, which would be a strategic act of transformation. The establishment of new cost-plus mines to supply Eskom is an opportunity to implement a comprehensive empowerment process involving both high levels of ownership and the progressive building of black operating capacity and enterprises throughout the mining value chain at a large scale. New Lago is an example of this kind of opportunity. I believe that in the near future we will have something very exciting to announce in this regard. It is critical that we use our state-owned companies to open up opportunities for black miners, both to supply Eskom, which is a very sustainable business which has built many giant mining companies, as well as to access export markets. Eskom has negotiated an export capacity allocation in the South Dunes coal terminal at Richards Bay, which will be used to provide emerging miners with access to global markets. We have established further a task team involving Transnet and the Chamber of Mines to determine how the expansion of the Richards Bay coal terminal can be leveraged to enable access to more capacity for emerging miners. Finally, the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Commission is taking the infrastructure program to a new level and has been applauded as a great initiative, which has embedded in it the philosophy of long-term planning, coordination, as well as integration. The strategic integrated projects are effective game changers in the sense that they enable qualitatively new economic activity on a significant scale, and their successful implementation requires an extremely high level of coordination between different state-owned companies, government departments and agencies, as well as private sector organizations. We recognize that the ability to design and efficiently implement game-changing mega projects is an extremely strategic capability for South Africa in its pursuit of development. Mega projects create an economic momentum, both through the process of their construction as well as in the ongoing economic activity that they spawn. In the coming months and years, these projects will gain traction and accumulate momentum that will allay the concerns about implementation and will result in massive investments. Meanwhile, profound lessons have been learned, both by Eskom and Transnet, and significant new organizational capabilities in the form of methodologies, processes and systems have been and continue to be built to manage these programs. As a result, both Eskom and Transnet are fast becoming leaders in their fields and will be able to implement and leverage projects on a scale and complexity that is beyond the capacity of any other organization in South Africa. I hope that we have been able to highlight the importance of our infrastructure state-owned companies, their operations and investment programs in driving economic growth as a whole and industrialization and transformation in particular. In the process, they are also building key organizational capabilities that I believe will be extremely valuable assets for our developmental state in the future. At the end of the day, I would hope that we have also been able to indicate very strongly that together we are moving South Africa forward, and very fast. Thank you.
Minister Gigaba, thank you very much indeed. Those are the opening remarks from Minister there, talking about the massive plans. In fact, if they work and they roll out as planned, will be game changers, as he said. And well, jobs is a big thing for you and I at home. And let's hope that these plans, as they unroll, not only changes and transforms what South Africa looks like, but also the lives of many, many people across the country as well. We'll unpack that. He mentioned Transnet and Eskom a lot during his speech, and we'll be joined by the CEOs of both of those entities right after this, and you too can become part of this conversation. So don't go away. All of it happening very shortly.